Jordan. I'm the coordinator for the Local Catch Network. Local Catch is a network of fishermen, advocates, researchers, technical assistance providers, all working to strengthen local and regional seafood systems. And today we have the honor of having USDA architectural staff with us to talk a little bit more about the services that they provide specifically to people that are operating in the food system space. The way today is going to work is we'll probably have a little bit of a smaller group, but we'll have Ron and Sasha give a presentation to talk about, again, the services offered by USDA architectural staff. And then we'll open it up to a Q&A. So if you guys have questions, be sure to keep those in mind and use the chat to put those in. And then we will open it up following the Q&A for a little bit more of discussion. So we'll transition kind of from talking about USDA services to just an open space for you all to connect and get to know each other a little bit better if you would like to stay on to do that. So for now, what I will do is I will pass it over to Ron and Sasha to introduce themselves and get us started for the day.
Hello, everyone. Give me just one moment and I'll start the presentation. So thank you for having us. It's a great opportunity for us to speak about our program and share a little bit about the things that we do and how far our services reach. So I'm Ron Batcher. I'm a licensed architect, and I'm the lead architect for the program here, the Wholesale Market and Facility Design Program. And I'm joined by Sasha.
Hi, Sasha Pokrovskaya. I am the other design professional working in the architectural field here in the Wholesale Markets and Design Program.
So everyone is usually really surprised that we offer this no-cost architectural design service. And they're even more surprised to know that we've actually been around since the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946. Back then, our division had a large number of architects and engineers that worked on the development of the wholesale markets and terminal markets across the US as they are today. Many of those buildings really haven't changed much. They are still operating with some challenges. We help them with their infrastructure upgrades, and we're looking at a lot of these buildings aging out now. So we assist them at a large scale, and we'll show you some examples of those as we go along with our presentation.
So some of the objectives for this presentation are to showcase, really, as Ron mentioned, some of the projects that we have done in the past that will hopefully serve as an example to illustrate our capabilities here and the services that we offer. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the new resources, especially with the Build Back Better plan. There's more funding opportunities available from the USDA, and answer any questions you may have about a facility you're planning or a market facility, any kind of project related questions you might have or ideas you'd like to kick around. I think we have sufficient time for that.
So we'll get into some project examples. When we say we do no-cost architectural design services, people's eyes are usually pretty wide open. But we have to clarify what those services actually mean to our stakeholders. They are just design related. So we don't get into any construction documents. We don't do any engineering services like mechanical, electrical, plumbing services. But we do get into locating a lot of those equipment on the plans that we work on. And our services range from anywhere from hand sketches to full-on design documents, as you'll see. We also provide 3D renderings as well. And let's get into some examples and you could see. So getting back to our roots with wholesale markets and terminal markets, we can work on a very schematic level where we work with a stakeholder, select their site. This example here, we actually have a terminal market out in San Francisco that is being relocated from their current market location, and they're moving to a new site. And they contacted us to work with them on developing their site to its maximum capacity. And this is just the first rendition. And this certain example is near an airport. It has a new roadway going over the top of it. So we deal a lot with height restrictions, site restrictions, vehicle access, turning radiuses of trucks to make sure everything fits in the site and has the ability to maneuver around the site. We do a lot of those services as part of our program. After the initial design, we wanted to maximize the storage in that facility, which is what you see at the top. Obviously, this is challenging. It didn't have really flow properly. So what we ended up working with the stakeholder and coming up with the lower option here, which allowed for an on-dock market where customers can come and take a look at the fresh produce every day before it went out to the local markets. They also included a shareable kitchen in the facility, as well as an educational component in this site. Now, this is just remaining schematic currently until the current landowner actually has them relocated and they're really not sure. So we can work at a very basic schematic level as part of our services. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on how some of those services can expand.
Yeah, exactly. So Ron just mentioned that we work on the schematic level. Even before we start with what's formally called schematic design in the architectural design process, a lot of times clients that come to us or our stakeholders come to us and they're not even sure about what they would like in the building and they want to work through some ideas, and we start with them with diagrams, bubble diagrams. So we call that the conceptual stage of design. Sometimes they're hand drawn, as you can see over here on the left hand side. This is actually a little fish store and small retail facility in Alaska. Sometimes they're much bigger, like the drawing you see on the right hand side, which is a conceptual drawing of a food hub and processing facility for local and regional food in Illinois. So they're just helping the client to understand potential square footages and to think through, and we assist them by putting those thoughts of the design on paper and those ideas onto paper. And that's where we start when we start designing.
Now I'll go to this next slide, but I'll backtrack a little bit because I didn't really fully describe all of the different types of facilities that we work with. I don't ever like to say no in accepting any stakeholders into our program. The basis for acceptance is if it's a food-related facility. If it's a food-related facility, we can help you. So if it's a farmer's market, food hub, leasable kitchen, market space, wholesale markets. We get into some other niche meat markets as well. I can stretch the boundaries a little bit with a little bit of autonomy that we're given to help stakeholders. But as long as it's food related, we can generally fit it within our program. Now, the example on the screen now is kind of a trend that we're seeing across the US, especially in rural areas right now, where we're calling them food centers. It's where there's a central local facility that supports business aggregation, business development, has a leasable kitchen to where local people can come in and basically have a maker space to produce their products. Some of them have a maker space where they could actually sell their products from that location. This example has a small business incubator for a cafe, a leasable kitchen, and a food hub on the backside. This is a very small community that is it's Appleton City, Missouri. So it's about 45 minutes away from any major city. And generally, the people that live in that very small community have to travel that 45 minutes to any large grocery store to attain any of their produce. So this idea was a way to have something very central to Appleton City, especially since the whole entire town is surrounded by farmland. They just didn't really have any central aggregation space. And this also fit a need for the community, because in the years past, there was a small cafe in this community. That cafe closed, so there wasn't any more space for their farmers to get together every Saturday and talk about their week and their challenges that they'd had on the farm. So they actually ended up just setting up lawn chairs in the local gas station every week and grabbing their coffee there. So this fit into their needs in the community. Getting back to the roots of wholesale markets, now that we are actually able to travel now, those restrictions were just lifted for the USDA, as long as we're not traveling to any one of those red communities or red areas. Our services do include, depending on the size and the need of the stakeholder for travel to their site. This is the New England Produce Center in Chelsea, Massachusetts. They amazingly had their original documents from 1966 when I showed up there on site. They had rolls and rolls and rolls of drawings that I was able to go through and work with them on what they intended to expand all of their 4 site structures by 40 feet to basically double the size of the wholesale market there in Chelsea, Mass. I painstakingly spent 3 days. They didn't have a large format scanner, so I actually took a photo of every single document and digitized it and categorized it and shared it with the market manager there as a record drawings. This is another example, so that our services do include site visits. We do document reviews. We survey existing buildings for their viability or challenges they may have. And these are just the examples of what they were asking us to do there. And you'll see some more 3D examples later. This is their site plan with their 4 buildings. And after converting all of those digital or those hand-drawn documents, we converted them digitally into a 3D model, which is what you see here, with the additional 40 feet on the back side of each one of these buildings. With our design services, we do look at the structure, we look at the whole building and all of its components. Our designs incorporate ADA compliances, rules, regulations, and codes. Certain jurisdictions have different regulations, which we don't generally get into local regulations and codes, but we use the International Building Code for our design services and the new ADA regulations. But as far as food facilities go, they add some more challenges. So we have to deal with turning radiuses of forklifts and 18-wheelers and box trucks. So those are all included in our design services and how we develop a building from scratch. So as you can see, everything that we do, we use a program called Revit, which is a 3D modeling software, where each one of these components is actually a 3D element, and it can be categorized. So we can easily pull off square footages, volume calculations, and material calculations. And this also allows us to provide square foot cost estimates. That's another part of our services. We don't get into the nitty gritty as far as how many square feet of gypsum wallboard you have, but we do give you a sliding scale as far as the square foot cost estimate. So we can get you in the ballpark. I know construction wise, things are fluctuating pretty drastically, and they have been for the past few years. So we don't like to give stakeholders just one number, but let them know that things can vary depending on when they build these structures. So this is a 3D model that we developed for those buildings. So as you can see, it has all the structural components in it. I mean, this is a really good representation of what the actual building is now, with all the components inside on top of the addition that we were looking to expand this market with. Now, we don't just do 3D renderings. We do often get a chance to do some nice hand drawings. And like I said, if it's a food-related facility, we can generally assist. This is a unique greenhouse in Missouri. They're looking to expand their growing season, and they wanted a kind of an out-of-the-box thinking in how to create that space. And this is really a self-sustaining greenhouse where it collects the heat from the day and extends that heat throughout the evening, so you don't get any major fluctuations in temperatures. And I always like to say I really love my job. We always get to do the fun part of architecture all the time, and I still get to hand draw and play with markers. So that's always a fun thing to do when we have that opportunity.
One of the projects that we have year to year is a kind of backyard laboratory, I guess we could call it. And that's the USDA Farmers Market located here at headquarters. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I have personally never been to it, but it's been going on for over 20 years. Isn't that right, Ron?
Yes.
I don't know the exact year it started. And so we lay out the tents, and that's something that one of the aspects of the program that used to be very common, and we haven't had as many requests for assistance, but it's definitely an example of what we do offer as a service. So here we've laid out the vendor tents, and for this coming year, we're trying to be mindful of social distancing and giving a little bit more space to the tents and the vendors than would have happened otherwise. We had a couple other requests where farmers markets have approached us to redesign their layout because of the pandemic. We didn't actually have as many as I would have thought, honestly, for those kinds of requests, but if that is something that is important to our stakeholder, we will absolutely accommodate them. I think that's good for this slide. Next slide, please.
So one of the unique things that we have at the USDA Farmers Market is what you see in the center is VegU. Each week they have a different educational program for the fresh produce in the market. Every week they pick one of the newer products generally, and you know they had a really great mushroom talk the one week, and they basically handed out all of these mushrooms. I was pretty excited about that, but it's a way for people that aren't familiar with a lot of the produce that is in farmers markets to really be familiar with, hey, what do you actually do with this once I bring it home? So that's an invaluable resource, I think, that we have at the USDA Farmers Market, and they have been doing virtual presentations as well. So if you have the opportunity to check out any of those, they're pretty fun. So as far as farmers markets go, we do have some requests for permanent farmers markets. Generally, farmers markets that have been in operation for quite some time, they'll come to us and say, hey, this has been here for all this time, and we finally need a permanent farmers market. This is just a small example of what we can provide. This is a little bit more detailed than a number of the markets that we usually work with. As you can see in the last slide, it was just a simple tent setup. But like I mentioned before, This gets into all the clearances, and it gets into ADA compliance to make sure all of the building components and doors and all the fixtures and accessories are located properly and have the right clearances. Whenever we work with our stakeholders, we get an immense variety of different people that contact us. From a simple farmer who had some property one time, he wanted to build a permanent farmers market. Kind of steered him away from that, because once we finally got started to talk, he didn't really have any farmers interested yet. He just thought it was a great idea to have a permanent farmers market on his property. So it's working with stakeholders at that basis level to work with them on what they really need to look for, what they really need to invest in their ideas. So we don't just do drawings, we do get into some of those non-tangible services as well. So let's move on. This is one of our larger projects that's coming up. I'll pass this over to you, Sasha.
Sounds good. So this is a quite a remarkable design and project because of the scale, and it's a good. Let me backtrack for a second. So this is a food processing facility, and with room for cold storage, and it's going to service the Washington, D.C. area. But there's no facility like it in the area at the moment. We were approached by Wendy Stewart, who's a consultant in the local food sector, and she had done a ton of research and wanted to have a drawing to use as kind of a proof of concept, and also to use it to work with the zoning and planning board here in Washington, D.C. in order to finance this facility and to find a place that could be a location that could be used for it. So she had worked with us, as well as her coworker at FoodWorks, extensively, going back and forth with multiple iterations to really develop this so that it could have these components with cold chain that's preserved, and that which will be the produce section would be separate from the meat processing, protein processing section. And one of the goals here is also to keep in mind sustainability goals, especially those that are perhaps more rigorous than in other areas of the country. DC is one of the leaders in the sustainable movement and has more rigorous requirements. So those had to be addressed. There's a unique element of a biodigester here as well, trying to keep in mind that one of the challenging portions of facilities like this is taking care of waste, and how to remove waste effectively, how to keep the flow going so that the facility is used efficiently and very user-friendly. So you can see that there are different zones here with diagrams showing how the different zones would be used to separate and avoid cross-contamination, especially in compliance with USDA regulations that would limit cross-contamination and make it easy so for vehicles that are going to service this facility to come in and out. And this was very successful as a proof of concept drawing that has actually resulted in, what is the exact figure, Ron? I think somewhere around 7 million has been allocated in order to make this building a reality. And one of the goals,
I believe that's the number, yeah.
And one of the goals is to have a place that a local place here in DC that is able to process local foods and then service the public schools as well. So hopefully this facility will enable that. And this is a conceptual design because they were using this and really thinking through the space requirements in order to be able to find a piece of land that would be compatible. So this design that you see here is not for any specific site yet, but they were able to use this in order to search for a site. And I think that's where they're at in the process at the moment. Yeah. Another service that we provide that is not usually a part of standard architectural services, but usually is an additional service requiring additional funds. And as one of our goals is to lower the barrier into entry for our stakeholders so that they're able to launch their businesses earlier or to really help them when they're doing fundraising. One of the things that our stakeholders find most helpful is the ability to use 3D renderings that we provide in their grant applications or in their fundraising efforts, or really to conceptualize. Sometimes they want to use our renderings for a town hall presentation or something like that. So this is a service that we provide since we do use 3D software to model, as it were, to draw our drawings. We are using the latest technology to do that in this 3D software that allows us to provide these 3D renderings and the views. So on the left-hand side, you can see the processing facility with a green roof and solar panels to really accommodate that sustainable objective, as well as interior views, thinking through the concept as well as visualizing it in terms of storage, what those racks might look like with and the pallet jack to negotiate around them. You can see those views on the right-hand side as well, really thinking through as well as making it a reality. People respond very well to visual information. This is a way for them to see those projects as they might look, not exactly, but giving an idea of what those things will look like the kitchen rendering that you see on the bottom right-hand corner. This was a renovation project, again, where one of our stakeholders, I believe in rural Illinois or Indiana, approached us, and they had an existing building that they wanted to be more modern and they wanted to update the facade. And they approached us to provide this service that frankly would have cost them more if outside of the basic services they would receive from an architect. We provided them with these renderings, and I believe that they used these in town meetings as they went through the proposal and the fundraising efforts to get buy-in from the community as well. And that's really one of the key services that we provide. So we do not provide any engineering drawings or any kind of drawings that can be used for construction, but we do help people as a pathway to lowering the barrier into entry into businesses. We provide these conceptual drawings, really developing ideas and then going through the basic stages of design so that later they can be turned over to a local architect who's going to be more familiar with the jurisdictional requirements of the jurisdiction where the building will be built. And we are sometimes asked to work also as a third-party reviewer, consultant, or consultant in terms of our familiarity with food-related facilities. If the local architect is not familiar with how a commercial kitchen should be laid out, or any of the other myriads of design considerations that go into food-related facilities, that's really where they approach us for consultation. And that kind of synthesis working together enables us to help our stakeholders and really provide services to many, many communities across the United States.
So, like I said, if it's a food-related facility, we can help with. This is just a small example of a storage facility. This is actually a shared use kitchen. One of the ghost kitchens, it's not on this plan, it's on the first floor. And they were looking at a concept of actually expanding their storage to the second floor of the building that they were on. And, you know, we always account for, like I said, this was actually one that we were able to travel to. We do on-site inspections and surveys as part of our services when we have that opportunity. So we do get to account for the building structure, its size, its interior capacity, and we work with stakeholders to maximize these spaces. This is actually one of 3 iterations of this design that we worked with a stakeholder on. They initially had the idea of using forklifts in this space. And after doing the design, we realized that you would really only have 1/3 of the capacity than if you would just use hand trucks and people power to move things in and out of these spaces. As you can see on the top right-hand side, there's a building section. They decided not to go very high with their shelves, obviously, because they were just dealing with people moving their storage around. But there was a vast majority of space that they still could use for storage. So this is really our last slide. And of course, I've always talked a little fast, so I usually finish presentations a little faster, but I want to talk a little bit more about our program and some of the other things that we offer. And, you know, our services are no cost. So people really love that. But I always let people know that we are a very small program. It was just Sasha and I that do this nationwide. So our plates are generally pretty full. We don't have a advertising plan. It's really just doing sessions like this and having different groups invite us in, and we're really happy to be here today to spread the word about our program. We've just brought on a Pathways employee that's also helping with architectural design. So we've moved our goal line a little bit as far as starting new design projects. We're generally about 2 months behind when it comes to new technical design requests. As part of our program, there's no cost related to it. There's no grant related to it. We just have a simple 1-page architectural technical assistance request form that we ask our stakeholders to fill out and return to us. After we receive that, we'll set up a kickoff meeting where we talk a little bit more about your project and what your goals are. And then we'll work out a project schedule. So we like to see projects that are at least a year out from their initial construction. Anything sooner than that, we're really challenged, especially when it comes to 3D renderings and stakeholders that have some financial goals to meet. We have had a number of stakeholders come to us for those 3D rendering services, and it has worked out really well for them. You know, for the small amount of service that we provide, they can really capitalize on attaining funding by using those drawings and those 3D renderings to attain funding, to go after investors. We've seen anywhere from a couple $1,000s worth of funding up to the DC Central Distribution Center, which we showed here that, you know, they were awarded over $7 million worth of funding with the report that they had done along with our drawings. It's a really great way to visualize drawings. I know a lot of people have some challenges when it comes to trying to visualize a 2D drawing. So that's why we have that additional service that we provide to do these things in 3D, and it has worked out really well for our stakeholders. I've only been with the USDA since 2017. Before that, I ran my own design and construction company, and have been in the architecture field since 1998. And I've done a vast majority of different projects. And I think this is definitely one of my favorite things to do, especially helping out stakeholders at no cost to them, and really enriching some of our stakeholders with the services we provide. So some of the other resources, these are some direct links to our services. The technical assistance request form, like I said, it's a 1-page form. It's really simple. It's pretty much a point of contact, their address, what type of project that you're looking at doing, where your potential project location is, if that site is different, and then just a description of what you're looking for out of our service. And that's all we really need to get the ball rolling. We do like to have both Sasha and I contacted with those requests, so we both have those in our correspondence. Once we receive that document, we will go ahead and give you a unique project number to include in all of your correspondence in the future, so we can easily find those and keep track of projects. Since I think currently we have a total of 61 outstanding technical assistance requests to date for this fiscal year. So we are generally pretty busy, and our emails definitely get full. So we want to make sure that we are aware of people when they contact us. I'm sure you've probably seen other AMS grants and opportunities, but that direct link is there. And there are a lot more new opportunities coming out. And we always let people know that you should sign up for our press releases, especially with some of the new things coming out with Build Back Better. Rural development has some new opportunities that stretch into urban areas, especially with our wholesale markets. It gives them an opportunity to use some of those services that are generally not allowed under certain grant restrictions. So they are opening up some more opportunities soon. So if you sign up for those press releases, that's a great way to get the most recent information and newest opportunities. And with that, I'll go on to questions anybody might have.
Yeah, you all feel free to unmute to ask questions. It looks like we have a few in the chat here, but yes, please feel free to unmute.
Hi, this is Stephen Stos. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Just a brief introduction. I'm an economist. I work at the Southwest Fisheries Science Center in La Jolla, California. And I've been working for a few years as kind of a volunteer consultant to a group of fishermen who run the Tuna Harbor Dockside Market in downtown San Diego. So I guess my first question for you guys is, do you have a background of working with fishermen in sort of the local catch market space?
We have had a couple small stakeholders come to us for small markets, and we've worked with them. I always like to say being an architect is like playing with Legos all the time. We just have a whole set of things to work with. It's just the way you put them together. So it's generally pretty easy for us to catch on to new things and help our stakeholders, especially when it comes to markets. A lot of them are laid out very differently, but they do generally have the same kind of rules and regulations. So we're happy to help anyone that asks us for our requests or for our services. But we have had some in recent years, especially when it comes to meat processing and the shortfalls of some of the processors across the US and fish markets. We have seen a few. They are few and far between, but they are increasing, and we like to. That's why we're here today, to get the word out to hopefully help more people, especially in the local catch network.
Great. So just very briefly on my background, I've got a PhD from University of California, Berkeley's Agricultural and Resource Economics Department. And back in the early 2000s, when I was looking for a position, I had dual offers from the Economics Research Service of USDA and also the NOAA Fisheries, Southwest Fisheries Science Center. I took the Science Center offer, but anyway, I feel like I've got kind of a dual background in agricultural economics and fantastic official in the a couple of projects that we're trying to get going in San Diego. Most of what I know about architecture, I admit I learned from your excellent presentation just now, but I can see great potential in a couple of areas where the fishermen in my community are interested to develop a fresh catch auction. And there's obviously a great potential for input from architects on how to conceptualize the space to support that. They have a facility, an existing fish processing facility, which they think may be something that could be transformed into a site for the auction. I'm not going to tell them how to do the design or how to conceptualize it, but you guys sound like you are the perfect team to take that role on if you're interested. The other bigger picture project, one of my colleagues, Sarah Schaffler is her name, is interested in the idea of developing a seafood hub in San Diego. And I don't know exactly what that entails, but from an economic standpoint, what I see is a great market from the tourism industry in downtown San Diego. There's great restaurants down there. They need fresh seafood to provide the tourist industry with seafood. And there's great fisheries resources offshore. The bottleneck is the mechanism for getting the seafood from out in the ocean to the fishermen onshore to supply fresh fish to the restaurant industry. So this is a project that I think is larger scale, and I'm not sort of the person who's driving the bus on that one, but I think there's a couple of great potential projects where your guys' input could be helpful.
Sounds great. So one thing I hadn't mentioned, I don't know if, Sasha, I'm sorry if I missed it, but some of the other things that our services do provide, we only go through design development, but whenever we develop anything in 3D, we take those documents and everything we developed and basically hand over everything to that local architecture engineer that's going to move it forward. So they don't have to start from scratch. So they have the 3D models, they have our drawings, they have all of that to start from. So that helps out drastically, especially coming from the private sector previously. If I have something to start from, that's definitely a lot better. So we'll hand that over, but we also may stay on as a third party. So if you have existing architectural drawings or you're working with an architect and you don't necessarily want to ask them the question, you can come to us. We could take a look at the drawings. We can review them. We can answer any questions you might have. We also stay on as a third party throughout the construction phase. So if you have any questions during that phase as well, even up through construction. So we're here to help, but not as a really a hands-on partner after design development, but we're here to help throughout the whole.
Yeah, and I actually play a similar role. I'm just trying to kind of help get something going that I think would be a benefit to the San Diego fishing community and also the tourism industry. And I'm just basically kind of trying to help facilitate putting in place something that would be a great asset, I think. And for what they're trying to do with the fish auction fits your guidelines pretty well. We're trying to get Saltonstall Kennedy grant funding, and if it gets approved, the timing of the actual project would be more than a year out. So I think we're just basically in the discussion stage at this point. So I'll consult with the fishermen and try to look into whether we want to put in a request and see where it goes from there, if that sounds good.
That sounds great.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Tom, I see you have your hand up.
Say again.
You have your hand up, Tom?
Yeah, well, great presentation. It's really exciting stuff, and the timing couldn't be better for the Port of Port Orford. I'll echo a few things I just heard from Stephen. I work here in a small fishing town called Port Orford on the south coast of Oregon. And I actually work for Oregon State University. My background's in fisheries science, and I'm a former commercial fisherman myself. Been working with the fleet on this for a while, served a couple of terms as a port commissioner, and now doing some consulting work with the Port of Port Orford on their redevelopment plan. And the core of that plan is the development of a seafood hub that has sort of, is now in the position to really take a good advantage of your services. because a lot of that preliminary work, site planning, a lot of thinking has gone into what they're trying to put in place, which touches on a lot of things that were just described about what they're trying to do in San Diego. So what we're looking at is a seafood hub that co-locates commercial and retail seafood, a ocean innovation lab, for lack of a better term right now, that the university is interested in putting in place, and some aquaculture / mariculture facilities related to work we're doing here on kelp forests and sea urchins and other edible seaweeds. So there's a lot of things you've been talking about. I've been taking furious notes, because almost everything you're saying is, I'm thinking, that's something we need right now. So what I'd love to do is just, I got the link for the request form, is to go ahead and consult with the port, get that request into you guys, because I know that our redevelopment committee, our fleet, and our port manager are all going to be really excited to see what's possible. We've actually, they've secured a small USDA grant already for a community kitchen to be located within the seafood hub. We've got a couple of unique attributes that I think will be interesting to explore. One of those is that the Port of Port Orford is the sort of focal point for the live fish fishery here in Oregon. About half of the nearshore permits are held by local fishermen here. And that's a very interesting high value product, where the fish are kept alive from the ocean all the way to the end consumer. And you can imagine the requirements there having to do with seawater systems and holding tanks, and trucking tanks full of fish down the 101 to San Francisco to those end markets. And many of the things you discussed in terms of the kitchen, processing area, market, community kitchen, are all elements of this project, including these sort of like education elements, where the university and the Oregon Sea Grant program are all sort of currently active, but really looking forward to developing this kind of infrastructure to fully support those efforts. And so where it is right now is the port's rolled out a number of infrastructure grant proposals to EDA, FEMA, State Department of Transportation, for a lot of the connected to project components, new high capacity cranes and product handling equipment, a new seawater system, a road upgrade to the port, and now they're ready to get into exactly what you're talking about with this new seafood hub facility. The site plan is done, and there is actually a preliminary architectural drawing that was done a few years back, just as a first step. So I think that the ingredients are kind of all there to take this next step, and super excited to hear about this program. Thanks so much for making this, doing the presentation. And like I said, you guys can expect to see a technical assistance request form from the Port of Port Orford pretty soon.
Sounds good. So I see Sarah had a question about if this was going to be available. Jordan, I think you're going to make this is being recorded, so I think that's going to be shared. So there will be a link to this presentation that you can share along with anybody who wasn't able to make it today.
Yeah. Also, Sarah asked whether we have any resources to share past project designs so that people might get some ideas. So unfortunately, we don't have very many projects publicized yet, but that's something that we're discussing, and we're going to start putting together as future documents. And actually right now, Ron has pulled up some resources that are available on our website, the facility design website. Do you want to talk through those, Ron?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot I was sharing my screen. I usually just share the presentation. So we actually just released an architectural report that has been over a decade in the making. And these 3 documents, the designing food facility overview, planning, and optimizing form and function, those are 3 kind of kickoff documents that you can take a look at. They kind of describe our services a little bit more in depth, give you a little bit more detail, and kind of give you a walkthrough of what our services really are and how to really make those work for your project. Another one that down here that is relatable to kind of how a building can expand in different phases. This building a food hub from ground up is a good way to really take a look at how the process goes for designing and expanding a market over years to come. So we try to guide our stakeholders, especially when they're developing new structures. Building a new structure is very costly. We've seen a lot of food hubs that have folded because they spent a lot of money in their upfront infrastructure and didn't have anything after that, so they folded. So we try to work with our stakeholders to look for other sites, any existing buildings that you might be able to utilize. Start small. You might have a big idea, you might think big, but start building small and expand. That's generally the best way to go. What we've seen as far as past projects go in doing that. So that building a food hub is a good example of how that's done. So back to our presentation. So these are our emails. Like I said, if you could send those requests directly to both of us, that's helpful. One of us will catch it, and sometimes an email may drop into our not focused folder. So this is a better chance that we don't miss any that come through. And at the bottom, I think we've already shared this link in the chat as a direct link to what you had just seen for the website.
Thank you so much, Ron and Sasha. And Tom, was your hand still up from the last question?
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Sorry about that.
I have a quick question if Sasha and Ron, you want to stay on for another minute. Have you or do you all consider like a mobile processing facility or like mobile facilities? Is that something that you all would be willing to work on just to figure out the layout and the efficiency of the space that can be utilized? There are a lot of people that are thinking about these mobile processing facilities, and efficiency is obviously very important. And so I'm just curious to know if that's something that you guys have worked on or would work on.
Yes, to both. We have worked on a few. That's also something we like to let people know if they're working on a mobile, something that's mobile. Our grants can potentially be used to purchase that equipment. We currently do not have anything brick and mortar related as far as our grant opportunities go. But the new rural development opportunity, it's a 0% interest loan that you can use for brick and mortar. So that's something that I don't know if I have the link, Sasha, I don't know if you have it available quickly. If you could potentially find that, that's a good opportunity, especially if you're looking at building a new facility or upgrading current infrastructure.
Yeah, so there's a few grants and I will add them. And right now, this is the window I wanted to flag that some of our grant opportunities are currently open. As, for example, the local food, what's it, LFPP, and the farmers market promotion program and the
program.
local food promotion program, both of those are currently in their cycle. So I think the deadline for those is coming up in May 15th or so. It looks like the value added producer grant is also open, and the grant application deadline is on April 25th coming up. So let me copy those and put them in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, we earlier this week we actually hosted a LAMP grant forum where people spoke about their regional food systems partnership grants and LF and FMPP grants. And so we have a recording of that on our website as well for you guys if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the grant projects that have been funded, specifically like with a seafood focus. And so we're offering some technical assistance around LAMP grant applications as well. So yeah, thank you for plugging that, Ron and Sasha. Well, does anybody have any more questions for Ron and Sasha before we transition into the second part of this time of us gathering together?
Just thanks so much. Great presentation, really visual and inspiring, and look forward to working with you guys.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Yeah, I second that acknowledgement of your presentation. Like I said, I really knew little about architecture beforehand, and now I feel like I have the vision about what you guys bring to the table. So very well done.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to comment also those documents that we just published with the facility design report. Those are really helpful because many of our stakeholders, I mean, most people are not familiar with the architecture design process in general, unless they happen to be building or renovating their own home. And that's very rare as well. So we walk through the various design stages and the kind of considerations that are involved in that in those documents to really help people learn more about the process before they're jumping in.
Wonderful. Ron and Sasha, thank you so much for your time. As mentioned, we'll send out the recording and then all of the documents and contact information for Ron and Sasha. Yeah, just thank you all for spending this time with us and and offering these amazing services for free to people in the food system space. So really appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us today.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.